Sometimes you find a writer by accident that sings to your heart in the best way possible, and that, for me, is Chandler Morrison. Chandler Morrison is a writer with gusto, guts, in many cases quite literally, and a creator of books that are going to push every button possible. Controversial subject matter, dark satire, and so much more just oozes out of his pages in the most amazing way possible. He self-published Dead Inside, which is a fascinating read, and after a controversial moment at Bizarro Fest, he was dropped by his then publisher, and yet his books continue to resonate and create. The Bizarro Fest controversy, where he had his girlfriend at the time paint a doll red, and there was some fake blood and a dildo and some other things, and he acted the abortion scene out from his book and proceeded to have a threesome with a fetus. That is a sentence I never thought I would ever say out loud. I had to burst out laughing when I read it because people were so offended, and triggering the snowflakes just makes me laugh because he is a phenomenal writer, and people were so offended, and they even made it a racial thing. It was absurd. Absolutely absurd. The writer, people really don't understand his work, and people don't get his work, I think. He has such a way with words, and his prose are absolutely spectacular, and even he admits to playing the edgelord on social media under the advisement of other people. I listened to the Bret Easton Ellis podcast interview, and I'd never heard this man speak. I don't tend to look up writers I like because I'm usually disappointed. I was not disappointed. And anyone offended by a clear satirist performance art really needs to get themselves in check. Goodreads tends to rip apart his work in ways which I find hilarious. The critics are so polarised. People are so offended and shocked. Oh dear. Someone wrote something remotely gory. Someone is making fun of people. Who cares? Goodreads is a cesspit at best, and let's be honest here. Sometimes you need a voice like his to stir the pot, to break those boundaries, and sometimes you just need someone that's in and out of all of it. American Narcissus, another book by him which is absolutely fantastic, and to quote many others, I quite happily put his works next to people like Chuck Palahniuk and Bret Easton Ellis, to name but two, and people clearly don't understand his work. And that's what I find fascinating. What are the key points of his work, of Chandler Morrison? What are his key points in fiction? Let's look at them. His writing style and themes, they're often categorized by dark and unapologetic exploration of dark and taboo subjects. His work dives into horror, transgressive fiction, and satire, pushing the boundaries of conventional storytelling. His most notable work, in terms of just populace, is Dead Inside. It's somewhat infamous. It's a transgressive horror story that caused controversy for its explicit content and shocking themes, yet garnered critical acclaim for the same thing. Let's be real, these people can never make up their minds. The critical reception of his work is often extremely polarising, both critics and readers. While some praise his approach to his work and storytelling, and his ability to confront societal taboos, others criticise his work for being over-gratuitous and sensationalist. Reddit is a rat's nest, don't put his name in there. Influence and inspiration. He draws influence from classics and contemporary, including horror legends like Stephen King, as well as transgressive writers such as Chuck Palahniuk and Bret Easton Ellis. He has built a dedicated following within the niche of the horror genre, extreme horror literature genre, and he has participated in many conventions and literary festivals, and he engages with his audience and discussions his approach to writing, which are often fascinating and worth tracking down on YouTube. Controversy. Due to the explicit nature of his work, which has led to debates about the limits of artistic freedom and the ethical responsibilities of the writer, which I think are absolutely trash discussions. Art is meant to make you wince and make you think. Artists are here to disturb the peace. I use that quote a lot, but it's very, very true. I think he confronts his readers to confront the uncomfortable realities and question societal norms. Literary style. His poise is known for being extremely imagery based. Stark realism, dark humour. He often employs a dark first-person narrative to immerse the reader into the works he creates, and the worlds and the characters. Public persona. He maintains quite a heavy presence on social media, and he interacts with fans and often discusses views on writing and the horror genre. He has candidness and willingness to address critics head-on, which has made him an extremely notable figure within literary circles. In the contemporary landscape of horror and transgressive fiction, few names evoke such an interesting reaction as Chandler Morrison, a writer unafraid to push boundaries and challenge taboo subjects. He has carved out a niche for himself with his unapologetically raw storytelling through his works, and dives into the darkest corners of the human psyche and exploring themes that most would shy away from. Chandler Morrison emerged on the literary scene with boldness, and that immediately set him apart. His writing style, categorized by its brutal honesty and unflinching depictions of grotesque realities, has garnered some fans and vocal critics. His work is not for the faint of heart. It often includes graphic depictions of violence and explicit content, and themes that question the moral and social norms. The works that define him. His most notable work is Dead Inside, a novel that became somewhat infamous in horror and fiction circles, and the book tells the story of a hospital security guard and a necrophiliac nurse who form a disturbing relationship. A plot that immediately sets the tone of this kind of boundaries that Morrison wanted to push. The novel is not just shock for shock's sake, it's deeply unsettling and explores human loneliness, alienation, and the dark side of the desire. Another word that comes up a lot in his is Along the Path of Torment, and that work goes into a psychological complex that are horrific and dives into themes of manipulation, identity, the nature of evil, and presents readers with moral questions and an unrelenting look at human depravity. The controversy and the conversation. He's undoubtedly controversial, and if you're watching on Patreon, I will go into that more with more of a take at the end, but for YouTube viewers, I'm sorry I had to cut that. He is unapologetic in his portrayal of taboo subjects, often him to lead to polarized opinions. Critics argue that his work is gratuitous violence, explicit, and crossing lines that belief should remain uncrossed. However, many praise him for his bravery in tackling difficult and uncomfortable topics, and his ability to evoke strong emotions, response, and thought-provoking poise. The controversy is part of what makes him a significant figure in modern literature. He forces readers and critics alike to confront their own boundaries of discomfort and morality. In a literary world often polarized as palatable and marketable, his works stand out as raw and unfiltered and truly natural. The impact on horror, modern horror, and transgressive fiction. Morrison is part of a movement within horror and transgressive fiction that challenges conventional storytelling and pushes the genre into new territories. His work is a testament of power of literature to shock, disturb, and ultimately make us question the world around us. By confronting the darker aspects of humanity, Morrison and his contemporaries are exploring the boundaries within horror fiction. He is a writer whose works demand attention, whether it's through reading, complex study, whatever you want to do to enjoy his works. His novels are not just stories but experiences that force the reader to grapple with their own perception of morality, decency, and the limits of human behaviour. As horror and transgressive fiction continue to evolve, his voice remains significant and a provoking one, challenging us to look into the abyss and find the meaning in darkness. For my Patreons, here is my unfiltered take and my unfiltered ending that I had to cut on YouTube, and I really hated doing it. I discovered his work through the Bret Easton Ellis podcast, really. I had read Dead Inside, but an absolute age ago, so it forced me to reread it. I was not disappointed. Dealing with the themes of necrophilia and toxic relationships and the manipulation of two toxic people together can be amazing. The controversy surrounding him is ridiculous. He was labelled a necrophiliac, a baby fucker, and many other things along the way. Yet, if you actually sat down and read his books, you would realise how intelligent they are. He has a voice unlike no other, and the controversy that surrounded him and the triggering the snowflakes, air quotes, I find fascinating. People were so up in arms about his work and the meanings, and how dare he write something that pushes those boundaries. The abortion clinic skit at Bizarro Fest, I think it was called, and I wish I could find that on the internet. I have seen it, but a very long time ago. He is a writer that is so willing just to push those boundaries and break those doors down that it makes me wonder why writers in the publishing industry are so safe. Every big novel is a literary fiction written by the same generic-looking, university-educated woman, and there is nothing wrong with that, by the way, before anyone gets offended on their behalf. Don't do that, it's not a good look, is it? The safety and lack of boundary pushing in modern publishing is very evident, and sometimes we need things that confront us, that break our brains and hurt us in different ways. I've never understood the sheer level of offence. The baby was painted red to represent blood, but somehow they thought it was brown and it became a racial thing. He was labelled everything under the sun, from pedophile to baby fucker to necrophiliac to just downright sick. People are weird. The internet is weird. And people will get offended over the most ridiculous thing. One thing I've learnt about reading the reaction to his work is that most people don't give a flying fuck about having their own minds pushed. They want to be in the safe little bubble of the new romantasy novel by some random writer they see trending on social media, or the Oprah Book Club. God, who reads the Oprah Book Club, let's be honest? A woman I cannot stand. In general, a person I cannot stand. There's no denying that one. I detest Oprah. When I went back into his books and started reading them again, I realised how we need writers that push these boundaries. The controversy of Fight Club, the controversy of the film The Joker, yet no one comments on the violence in other films such as John Wick, worried that some incel is going to climb the rooftops and shoot everyone. I mean, violence is not created by media, violence is created by people who are not well, let's be honest. And sadly, we're seeing a mental health crisis rather than anyone fixing it. That's the difference, and that's what people aren't willing to say, because it would mean they'd have to confront a few things that would make them uncomfortable, wouldn't they? You have a writer who takes those boundaries and pushes them in every direction. The irony is, content-wise, I've read far stronger books in my time. I've read far, far, far stronger books. Yet, this one caused too many controversies for some people. Seeing the reaction to it made me realise that people are so busy trying to be this, trying to be that, trying to make themselves appear morally superior, and how brave and confronting this book is. Another piece of generic YA romantasy with a I'm not like other girls protagonist that sells so well. Why are we so scared of art? Why are we so scared of having our boundaries pushed? Why does everyone care so much that they are offended? Are they a bunch of children pretending to be adults? I don't think so. I think they just want clout. The clout chasers on social media and the cesspit that makes Twitter unique is fascinating. But sometimes you need a writer that pushes those boundaries. Have we become too safe in our choices and what we love? Have we become what we are not? I've said this before and I'll say it many times, and it's a quote, but ironically I'm not lifting it from the original source, I'm lifting it from Madonna of all people. Artists are here to disturb the peace. Art should be confronting. Boundaries should be pushed. We should deal with taboo subjects. Things should be controversial. Why are we so stuck in our safe little bubbles? And even I admit that sometimes, especially when I first started doing BookTube thing, I was put off talking about controversial books because people would get offended. I talked about Lolita, which in my mind isn't actually happening and is all in the head because it's written entirely in prose. I talked about Fight Club, American Psycho, the perks of being a wallflower. The comments I received on that one actually made my skin crawl, out of everything. Books like Call Me By Your Name are deemed controversial, yet you have a writer that is so willing to take apart American and Western society. Stuff that he writes about is happening. There is no way around that. Who knows what happens in a hospital basement? Who knows what happens in a morgue? Read the news stories. It's fascinating. I'm going to leave this one here now, because I want you as a reader to make up your own mind and read these books for yourself without the usual baggage of what goes down. Sometimes we have to confront things that are uncomfortable. Sometimes we have to come out of our bubbles, but instead we don't. So, for those who enjoyed this, I'm glad that you did. Those questioning my sanity, which I'm sure there are many over the years, and those questioning my taste, read the books. Make up your own mind. Don't listen to Goodreads, Twitter, TikTok, or anything on social media. You have your own brain. Think with it.